Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little strange. You're going to walk through the desert in ancient Persia, and somehow, it's cold. The sun is burning above you, sand stretches for miles in all directions, and yet somewhere in the distance you see a structure that holds actual ice. Not metaphorical ice. Literal, crunchable, shiver-inducing frozen water. In the middle of a place that gets so hot your sandals might melt. And yes, you're going to try not to die of heat stroke while investigating it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening from. I always love seeing where we're dozing off together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking across a vast, salt-tinged plain in the Iranian plateau, the sun glinting off golden dunes in every direction. The wind is dry. It scrapes your cheeks gently like powdered chalk. The occasional call of a distant hawk echoes above, and every now and then a little gust kicks sand into your shoes, because naturally the desert has a sense of humor. But then you see it. A lumpy, beehive-like dome rising from the dust. It's not made of stone or metal, but mud brick. Tall, silent, strange. It almost looks like an enormous termite mound designed by an architect with a flair for mystery. You walk closer. The air around it somehow shifts. Cooler. Just slightly. And that's when it hits you. This is one of the Yakchal and ice pit of the ancient Persian world. A structure that without electricity, without fans, without even much shade, could store real ice through the blistering summer months. The kind of cold that could soothe a burn, cool a drink, or preserve a sweet treat. And it's just sitting here in the desert like a buried miracle. The Persians didn't mess around with heat. They lived in it, breathed it, built inside it, and still beat it. And the Yakchal wasn't a fluke. It was the pinnacle of climate-defying brilliance, a blend of intuition, science, and sheer determination. You duck your head and step into the shadow of the dome. The doorway is low. On purpose, of course. Cold sinks. Heat rises. The first rule of ancient Persian air management. Inside, it's immediately different. The desert sounds die. The light dims. Your skin, still warm from the walk, picks up the tiniest bite of chill in the air. There's a faint mineral smell, mud dust, and something like wet clay. The floor drops downward in a spiral. You carefully descend. It's like walking into a giant inverted thermos. And here's where it gets even more surprising. These things weren't just novelty freezers. They were lifelines. Families depended on them. Kings flaunted them. Merchants built their businesses around them. And somewhere between the dusty engineering textbooks and the old poetry scrolls, a whisper of frozen wonder weaves through Persian history. Imagine a boy running barefoot at dawn, holding a chunk of glistening ice to his cheek like a treasure. A bride sipping chilled pomegranate nectar during a midsummer ceremony. A caravan pausing at a yakshal to refill their cooling pots before another week across the Dasht-e Kavir. And no, they didn't rely on magic. Just really, really good design. Picture a structure made with walls over 2 meters thick, composed of mud, ash, sand, and goat hair. Yep, goat hair. Nature's humble insulator. These walls kept out heat like a fortress. And on top of that, the exterior was painted with a special lime plaster that reflected sunlight. So not only was it a giant thermos, it was a sun-proof bunker. Now, if you're thinking, okay, but where did they even get the ice from? Good question. And no, it wasn't conjured from thin air by some ice-wielding priest. That's next section's problem. For now, just soak in the beauty of the impossibility. You sit down on a stone ledge along the circular interior. Around you, the space narrows upward into a perfectly vented dome. It's like being inside the belly of a chilled cathedral. Some historians argue that the structure itself may have held ceremonial or symbolic meaning. After all, ice was more than utility. It was a sign of power control over nature and divine order. And yet here you are, lounging like a sleepy archaeologist inside one. If you were to light a lantern, the dome above would catch the glow like a star map, soft, warm, reflected against cold. Somewhere in the upper air, bats probably nested. Or owls. Or both. You don't check. Outside, the wind hisses across the dunes. Inside, it is quiet. Mainstream fact, yakshals were capable of keeping ice solid for months, even in desert temperatures soaring above 40 degree, 104 degree. Quirky tidbit. Some yakshals were also used to store pickled vegetables and delicate herbs, turning them into multi-season food bunkers. Open debate. Scholars still argue whether these ice houses were strictly utilitarian, or whether some served ritualistic or luxury-exclusive purposes accessible only to elites. You lean back against the cool brick and shut your eyes for a moment. Not to sleep yet, but to imagine what life felt like in a place where cold was so rare, people literally built temples to preserve it. And this is only the start. Because next you'll follow the icy veins beneath the earth, the Kanats, and learn how underground rivers shaped a civilization that refused to sweat unnecessarily. You step back out into the light, but not fully. Instead, you follow a narrow stone corridor branching from the side of the yakshal's base, sloping downward and curving gently like the burrow of some clever animal. The air grows cooler again, and this time it's moist too. Your feet splash softly as you step into the shadows of a tunnel, long low and humming faintly with the memory of flowing water. Welcome to the Kanat. At first glance, it feels like a secret passageway, some hidden escape route dug by ancient spies or mischievous children. But this is no accident, and it's no afterthought. The Kanat system was one of Persia's most extraordinary inventions, a vast underground network of hand-dug tunnels that carried water across brutal terrain without spilling a single drop to evaporation. And it wasn't just clever, it was essential. You imagine the scene teams of workers chiseling their way through desert bedrock, digging gently sloped tunnels for miles, sometimes across entire regions. They followed the contours of the land with uncanny precision, channeling mountain runoff underground, and delivering it to places where surface water dared not linger. It's pitch black now, except for your little lantern. The tunnel is just wide enough for one person, and the ceiling is low enough to make you hunch. The walls sweat a little tiny beads of condensation gathering on the clay. It smells ancient, mineral, alive in the way very old things are. Every so often you spot vertical shafts, deep round chimneys punched up to the surface like breathing holes. They let in air, helped the workers climb up and down, and occasionally gave brave children something to shout echoes into. The Kanats didn't just deliver water, they carried cold. Like veins beneath the skin of the earth, they moved lifeblood from the highlands to the low, cooling everything they touched. And when they fed into the base of a yakshal, they turned a hot hole in the ground into a storage miracle. You run your hand along the wall and feel the slight chill radiating from the earth itself. The trick wasn't just transporting the water, it was keeping it moving at just the right gradient. Not too fast or the tunnel would erode. Not too slow or the water would stagnate or warm. It had to flow like a whispered secret, steady measured and invisible. Mainstream fact, Kanats could stretch over 50 kilometers and date back over 500 years, still functioning in places like Yazd today. Quirky tidbit. Some Kanats had names like rivers or children, complete with origin myths and guardian spirits. Open debate, historians still argue whether Kanat knowledge originated independently in Persia or was borrowed from earlier Mesopotamian systems. You reach a larger chamber almost like a little underground plaza. This is a mother well, the original spring or aquifer that feeds the entire system. Standing here, it's hard not to marvel. You're in the middle of a desert surrounded by silence and dust. And yet below you, clean, cold water flows gently through a channel no wider than your forearm. No pumps, no wires, just slope patience and a terrifyingly good sense of direction. Imagine a day in ancient times when this water fed the bathhouses, the gardens, the fields. A time when entire villages clustered along its path, drinking from its branches like deer at a stream. And if you messed with the Kanat, oh boy, you didn't just break a pipe, you offended the spirit of survival itself. There were laws, you know, fierce ones, about stealing, polluting, or blocking a Kanat. One bad apple could ruin water access for hundreds. Back above ground, the heat smacks you like a clay oven door swinging open. You blink, sweating already. But your mind is still back down there in the cool hush where water and engineering met in sacred silence. The desert stretches again before you. But now you know beneath your feet, rivers move like quiet serpents. Ice doesn't just survive here by chance. It's been planned, coaxed, buried like treasure. A young boy runs past you now barefoot, carrying a small jug wrapped in cloth. He disappears behind a stone wall and reappears minutes later, jug full face, beaming. He's fetched water from the Kanat. Not a bucket from a well. Not a stream from a mountaintop. A silent current tapped by his ancestors, preserved by his father, and cooled for his grandmother's sherbet. You sit on a shaded ledge and let your heartbeat catch up. There's an eerie peace here, a kind of rhythmic heartbeat to it all. The Kanats don't roar. They don't gush. They breathe. You breathe. And soon you'll understand how Persian engineers didn't just dig tunnels and domes. They built an entire cooling system from dirt wind and stubborn brilliance. Because next you'll meet the wind catchers, those towering sentinels that pulled the breeze from nowhere and made air itself work overtime. You wipe the sweat from your brow again and glance up at something tall and slender rising from the rooftop of a nearby structure. At first, it looks like a decorative tower, the kind you'd expect to see on a mosque or palace. But this isn't for show. It's functional. It's brilliant. And it's about to blow your mind gently and with a breeze. Say hello to the badger or wind catcher. It doesn't do much at first. Just stands there humming faintly in the heat, its vents angled in odd directions. But as you draw closer, you feel it. A thread of cool air drifting across your face like a forgotten caress. It's subtle, no industrial fan here, but when you step into the doorway beneath it, the difference is startling. Cool, not cold. But in the middle of a Persian summer, that's a miracle. You step inside a modest clay brick home. It's quiet. A clay jug rests in the corner. The floors are cool beneath your feet. And high above you, the badger does its ancient work, trapping breeze, guiding it downward through a shaft and sending it spiraling into the rooms below. No electricity, no moving parts. Just wind, geometry, and a deep, almost intimate understanding of how hot air rises and cool air sinks. The wind catcher is more than an air conditioner. It's a passive cooling system, fine-tuned over centuries. The interior walls are designed to absorb heat during the day and release it at night. Water channels, sometimes fed by kanats, add humidity to the dry air as it passes. The result: a home that's always several degrees cooler than outside, and often enough to sleep store perishables, and even nap like royalty. Mainstream fact, badgers could cool buildings by up to 10 degrees even in scorching climates. Quirky tidbit: some were built with directional fins to rotate and face the prevailing winds like sleepy medieval weather vanes. Open debate. Scholars still argue whether the Persians or the Egyptians invented them first, with evidence of similar structures across Mesopotamia. You poke your head up into the shaft. It's a narrow vertical tunnel lined with polished plaster, or sometimes tiles. Not for decoration, for airflow. The smoother the surface, the better the air slips down, whispering like a polite ghost. If you're lucky, the badger even has a small basin of water beneath it, enhancing the cooling effect through evaporation. You close your eyes and imagine it the desert outside, dry and brutal. But inside, people sip tea, tell stories, take naps. Bread rises slowly in clay ovens. Yogurt thickens in shadowed corners. And all of it happens while the wind catcher plays silent conductor to an orchestra of gentle breeze. Outside again, you spot the skyline of Yazd, the city of wind catchers. Towers jut up like chimneys on a dreamscape. Each one slightly different, each one tuned to its owner's needs. Some have 4 faces catching wind from any direction. Others are narrow and tall, focusing on just one direction like a stoic sentry. It's like a forest of practical poetry. You walk past a merchant's house and he waves. His walls are thick, over 2 feet. His windows are few. His doorway is shaded. These weren't accidents. Ancient Persian architecture wasn't just about beauty. It was about beating the heat day in and day out. Badgers were the lungs of the home. Quiet, dependable, and cool. Now let's pause for a second and admit, we modern folks with our remote controls and smart thermostats are kind of spoiled. But these people, they made the wind serve them. They caught it, tamed it, and sent it on errands without fossil fuels, without fans, and without so much as a carbon footprint. You lean against a sun-warmed wall and let the breeze wrap around you like a scarf soaked in shade. And then the wind catcher sings not literally, but close. A low, hollow hum floats down the shaft caused by the meeting of hot and cold currents. A natural lullaby. You take a breath slow and deep. It's working on you too. Let's not forget wind catchers weren't just about staying comfy. They played a key role in protecting the precious ice stored in the Yakshal. Remember that dome back in Section 1? Yeah, some of them had bad jeers built into the upper chambers. It was like a team-up of cool heroes, underground water, thick insulation, and a rooftop breeze whispering down to keep the ice from crying. The craftsmanship involved would make any modern HVAC engineer cry softly into their blueprint. Bad jeers required precise angle calibration knowledge of local wind patterns, seasonal adjustments, and maintenance. And they often came decorated with geometric tiles, calligraphy, or glazes, because why not make your passive air conditioning system also stunning? It's evening now. The desert is glowing orange. The badgers catch the last breath of day and exhale it into homes preparing for dinner. You sit on a rooftop with a clay cup of dew yogurt drink with mint and salt and sip slowly as the breeze kisses your forehead. You ask a local how long these towers have stood. He shrugs. Longer than my grandmother's grandmother. And they still work. Still cool, still hum. Soon you'll learn that cooling the air was only part of the Persian plan. Next, you'll follow the mountain ice haulers, those midnight caravans that defied time and terrain to deliver winter itself to the heart of summer. The sun is gone, now sunk behind the distant Zagros mountains like a tired ember, and you find yourself walking by starlight. The air is still warm, but the edge of desert heat has dulled. It's the perfect hour for a secret journey, and tonight you're not walking alone. Ahead of you, dim lanterns bob like fireflies. You follow their glow and catch up with a caravan, a line of camels, donkeys, and muffled men, inching their way along a winding rocky trail. Their destination, the peaks above. Their mission, ice. It's the ice run, an ancient Persian logistical ballet, as thrilling as it is chilly. You fall into step with one of the porters. He's wrapped in wool despite the heat, his face hidden, except for sharp eyes and a sun-hardened grin. His camel snorts. Its saddle is empty for now, but by morning it will be loaded with precious winter. The trail steepens. Pebbles slide underfoot. You climb, and climb, and climb. By the time the stars tilt and the wind grows teeth, you've reached a snowbank, a remnant of winter tucked into a shaded crease in the mountainside. Here, men work in near silence, cutting blocks of ice with bronze tools and careful hands. Each chunk is wrapped in straw fabric or layers of sawdust, whatever can insulate the cold. They move with rhythm, not rush. Ice is fragile, not in strength, but in time. Lose too much heat and the whole journey melts. Mainstream fact ice was manually harvested in the mountains at night and delivered to cities hundreds of kilometers away without refrigeration. Quirky tidbit. Some records mention porters singing cold songs on the return to distract the camels from sensing the cool weight of their cargo. Open debate. Scholars still puzzle over the exact routes and schedules these haulers used given the terrain and timing necessary to minimize melt. By dawn, the convoy is heading back down. Each animal now carries padded baskets filled with ice blocks cradled like royalty. You walk behind, watching drips fall like silent pearls onto the trail. The air warms again. The race begins. Down through foothills along Connaught's past orchards still asleep, and then into the city. You arrive at a gate just opening. Merchants are sweeping dust from their stoops. Roosters crow obviously louder than needed. A boy runs past with a loaf of flatbread. And into this daily chaos strides the caravan of cold. You watch as the ice is divided. Some goes to the palace naturally, some to merchants, some to temples. A few pieces vanish into alleyways, black market ice traded for saffron or favors. But much of it's bound for the Yakshal, where it will rest until the city calls on it again. You follow one porter to the dome. You've been here before, but it feels different now. You're part of the system. The ice is slid inside carefully down the central chute. You hear the scrape, the echo, the deep, satisfied thump as it lands. And for a moment, you're tempted to dive after it and just curl up there. But maybe not. This journey isn't over yet. Instead, you sit with the porters for breakfast, flatbread, cheese, walnuts, and hot tea poured from a blackened kettle. They toast quietly with steam, their hands shaking slightly from the night's labor. You ask how often they do this. One man shrugs. As often as we can. Another says when the mountain gives. A third simply says enough to matter. Because cold in ancient Persia wasn't just comfort. It was dignity. It was the difference between wilted herbs and fragrant ones. Between spoiled yogurt and safe milk. Between heat stroke and hope. You sip your tea and realize it's been cooled slightly just enough by a drop of mountain ice. Your breath fogs as you exhale. For a moment, you imagine the snow still clinging to your clothes. Not possible, of course, but the idea feels real enough to shiver. Soon the caravan will leave again. They'll sleep through the heat and rise again at dusk, ready for another silent climb toward the sky. But not you. You have more to explore. Because next, you'll join the royal tables of Persepolis, where ice wasn't survival, it was spectacle. The city of Persepolis rises before you like a dream carved in limestone. Colonnades stretch into the sky. Reliefs shimmer faintly under an early sun. And somewhere in the marble depths of the palace complex, chilled sorbet waits to melt on a royal tongue. Today you're dining with kings, or at least you're standing awkwardly near their food. A trumpet sounds a long, sleepy blare, and servants begin to flow through the courtyard like threads of silk. Their tunics are crisp, their hands full. Clay bowls, metal trays, ornate jugs. And amid the feast of roasted meats, saffron rice, dried figs, and spiced wine, you notice a glimmer, a silver dish carrying a mound of something glistening and white. Ice. In the desert. Delivered from the mountains. Resting on a plate like a jewel. But this isn't just showmanship. It's dessert. Royal sorbet. You inch closer. It's flavored with pomegranate and rosewater, you're told. Maybe honey. Maybe a hint of something like ground coriander or mint. No one seems quite sure. What they do know is that only a handful of people in the entire empire will taste this cold glory today. And you, by some historical fluke or sleepy miracle, are one of them. The dish arrives before the great king. He tastes, nods. That's it. No fireworks, no drum roll, just an imperial nod of approval. Mainstream fact. Ancient Persian courts served chilled drinks and fruit sorbets during hot months using stored ice from yakchals and mountain runs. Quirky tidbit. Some historical poems suggest Persian kings had ice testers servants whose job was to sample the ice for purity before it touched royal lips. Open debate. Scholars still debate how widespread such cold delicacies were. Were they common court fare or only for rare ceremonial occasions? You drift from the royal dais and find a shaded alcove where lower-ranking officials are enjoying more casual cold treats. Thickened yogurt mixed with fruit, cooled water, scented with rose petals, and even frozen grapes wrapped in palm leaves. A musician plucks at a harp in the corner. The tune is slow drifting. You close your eyes, and for a moment you could be anywhere, except... Of course there's a falcon watching you from a carved perch. Royal places have royal pets. Servants pass with small clay pots, some sweating with moisture, others buried in bowls of sawdust to preserve their chill. A boy carries a jug with condensation trailing down its sides like lace. You realize this is more than a feast. It's a demonstration, a flex of empire, a reminder that even the desert bends for the king. You overhear two cooks debating sorbet textures. One swears by pomegranate reduction. The other insists it must include ground pistachio. You don't interrupt. These debates have been simmering since Cyrus the Great, and will likely outlive you. You wander the banquet hall. Overhead stone lions gape eternally. Underfoot slabs of marble feel oddly cool, perhaps by design. You pass a display of chilled wine, aged in ceramic amphorae that were buried beneath palace walls for insulation. You're told a particular cellar room had its own badger. Of course it did. Outside, the sun blazes. Inside, the shade and the yakchal-fed kitchens keep the air just tolerable enough for silk robes and sweet wine. At the end of the feast, a procession begins. Priests offer incense. Poets recite verses that vaguely rhyme. Dancers spin in white linen. And through it all, the cold dishes continue. Chilled melon, snow-stiffened saffron pudding, candied rose petals that seem to melt and crunch all at once. You steal one last spoonful from a silver tray and let it linger on your tongue. It tastes like dusk, like a breeze through pines, like something you'll never quite recreate, and then it's over. The trays are cleared, the harp fades, the king retreats, and the chill begins to drift away like the final echo of a glacier cracking in the farthest north. But the legacy lingers. Because the next time you sip something cold on a summer afternoon, remember some Persian worker hauled that concept up. A mountain walked it through fire and chilled it with science stubbornness, and no small amount of poetry. And as you leave the banquet and step into the heat again, you follow the trail of ice one more time this time, on the back of camels across the blazing sand, to the edge of another miracle cold storage in transit. The city fades behind you. The marble columns of Persepolis are soon swallowed by dust and distance, and in their place rises the familiar shimmer of the desert. A vast, hot ocean, without water, without mercy, and apparently without logic. Because right now you're watching camels carry ice across it. Yes, camels. The desert's most famously heat-proof beast is also moonlighting as a refrigerator delivery service. It's mid-morning now. The sun is climbing smug and unchallenged. The air smells like baked clay and sunburn. The only relief comes from the shadows cast by the caravan itself, long and wobbly shapes that ripple with every plodding hoofstep. But here's the thing, this isn't chaos. It's choreography. Each camel is packed with careful precision. On one side, bundles of straw cloth or animal hide. In the center, inside padded crates or covered clay vessels, sit the real treasures blocks of ice sealed like sacred scrolls. You join one of the handlers. His hands are calloused, his eyes squint from too many miles of sunlight. He doesn't say much, just nods at the ice-laden camel and offers you a sip of something tangy and cold. Cold. In the desert. Again. It never gets less impressive. Mainstream fact ice was transported across long desert routes on the backs of camels, using insulating materials like straw wool or even compressed ash. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient caravans built temporary underground pits mid-journey to recharge the cold by burying ice during the hottest parts of the day. Open debate. Scholars still debate the exact survival rate of ice on journeys exceeding 100 kilometers. Estimates range from 20% to 60% retention depending on insulation and timing. The caravan doesn't rush. That would be foolish. Speed equals heat. Instead, they move with the slow grace of patience weaponized. The trail dips through old riverbeds, scrapes past gnarled acacia trees, and edges close to cliffs that offer rare moments of shade. At midday, you stop. Everyone does. The camels groan. The handlers unwrap parts of the cargo, not all just enough to check. You peer inside a bundle. There it is, a chunk of ice, maybe the size of a hand, sweating gently but intact. A miracle cradled in a nest of straw and goat hair. You help dig a shallow pit nearby. Not deep, just enough to create a temporary cool refuge. A few ice pieces are stored here wrapped in cloth covered with earth and leaves. The sun may rule the sky, but here on the ground you've carved out a loophole. Afternoon drags. The air shimmers. Even your thoughts feel slightly toasted. But the caravan persists. Every few hours the handlers rotate, which camels carry ice to avoid too much heat concentration. You see them check for sweat patterns, rearrange packs, fan the cargo with palm fronds. It's like watching chefs mid-transit, except instead of soufflés, they're preserving cubes of winter. And it's not just royal shipments. Some of this ice is bound for apothecaries to chill herbal pastes and preserve delicate ingredients. Some is headed to bathhouses where high-status patrons expect not just steam, but balance. And a small portion is going to a private household where a merchant's daughter will taste her first sorbet at her wedding feast. You pause to imagine the reaction. A bride already overdressed in ceremonial silk, nervous and flushed, handed a bowl of frozen pomegranate with rosewater. One spoonful. Her eyes widen, and for a brief moment she forgets the crowd, the dance, even the groom. Cold, sweet, impossible. Back in the present, you continue walking. By evening, the caravan nears its destination, a regional town dotted with low domes and dusty palms. The ice is delivered like incense at a temple, carefully, reverently, quickly. Each handler bows slightly as they hand it over. In some houses, it is immediately unwrapped and used. In others, it's buried in underground cellars or transferred into smaller yakchals for future use. You trail behind the last delivery, a small package of ice handed to a woman in a humble stone house. She opens the bundle and places the block in a wide clay basin. Then she pours water over it and sets a jug beside it. Within minutes, the jug begins to cool. Her husband arrives home and drinks from it. He doesn't comment, just nods. It's not about spectacle. It's about continuity. About maintaining a quiet defiance against the tyranny of heat. You sit beneath a fig tree as the camels are unloaded, their burdens relieved, their heads lowered in contentment. One lies down and exhales loudly, dust puffing around its face like steam. You reach out and touch the saddlecloth, still damp, faintly cool. Soon the caravan will rest, then turn around, and do it all again. But you have new plans? Because in this town you've heard whispers about something even stranger than ice-laden camels or wind-whispering towers. A way to build cold into the very walls of a home. A system so subtle, so perfectly passive that it hides in plain sight. And that's where you're going next. It's a little past dawn. The town is waking slowly, goats bleating, bread ovens, crackling windows, creaking open to squint at the rising sun. You, however, are already on your feet, shadowing a local builder who's promised to show you the coolest house in the district. He's not wrong. It's literally cool. The structure is unassuming. A modest mud brick home on the edge of town. No ornate carvings. No towering minarets. Just quiet walls, a curved roofline, and a narrow doorway that opens into another world. The moment you step inside, the temperature drops. Not drastically, but noticeably. Like stepping into the shade after a long walk in the sun. Your shoulders relax. Your breath slows. You could nap here, and frankly, someone probably will in about 10 minutes. What makes this house different isn't visible at first, but as your guide gestures toward the floor, the walls, the low ceiling, it all starts to come together. This is climate architecture. Welcome to the genius of passive cooling, an ancient Persian design philosophy that turned homes into natural refrigerators using nothing but physics mud and obsessive observation. The home is partially sunken into the earth, only about a meter. But that's enough to tap into the stable subterranean temperatures that hover around 18 to 20 to 64 to 68 degrees year-round. You kneel and touch the floor. It's cool. Not ice cold, not artificially chilled. Just comfortably, surprisingly neutral. In the desert, that's practically a miracle. Mainstream fact. Persian homes often included semi-subterranean rooms called sardabs, specifically for heat insulation and cold storage. Quirky tidbit. Some sardabs doubled as nap rooms or secret libraries, since scrolls and sleepy grandparents both liked the chill. Open debate. Scholars still argue whether sardab construction was driven primarily by comfort or the need to preserve perishable goods in residential households. You pass through a narrow hallway with high walls and no windows. This isn't claustrophobia, it's strategy. The narrowness reduces surface area exposed to sunlight. The high walls trap shade for longer. And the ceiling domed and vented, of course. Hot air rises and escapes. Cool air sinks and stays. In the corner of the main room sits a large clay vessel, unglazed, porous, and sweating. Water inside it cools naturally via evaporation. You press your palm against it. Chilled. Almost startling. Next to it, a clay shelf holds yogurt sealed in ceramic pots. You lean close. Not spoiled, still fresh. You peek into a bowl of fruit, grapes, figs, mulberries. Nothing mushy, nothing rancid. You resist the urge to steal one. This room isn't just for lounging, it's for preserving. Your guide grins and leads you deeper into the house. A narrow staircase winds downward into a larger sardab. No lights, just the soft yellow glow of an oil lamp. You enter what feels like a sacred earthen crypt for lentils and rosewater. Shelves line the walls, stacked with pots, jugs, bundles of herbs. It smells like cumin and cedar and cool stone. You whisper. It just feels right. The ceiling is curved, the air completely still. You learn that at night they open certain vents to let cool, desert air in, then seal them before the day's heat begins. A rhythm, a routine. The house breathes, inhales at dusk, exhales at dawn. Above ground again, you step into a sunlit courtyard. It's paved with stone and centered around a small, shallow pool house, they call it. You splash your fingers through it. Cold. Not icy, but definitely not hot. You sit beside it and watch the breeze ripple its surface. Here, the combination of the house, the wind catcher above, and the thermal mass of the thick walls creates a naturally cooled environment throughout the day. And at night, you bet people drag cushions out here and sleep beside the water. You notice a series of narrow channels, canot-like veins running through the courtyard, directing water flow toward shaded corners. It's part irrigation, part engineering art. Your host brings you a drink rosewater and sour cherry over a clay-cold block of mountain ice. It melts slowly, infusing the cup with something floral and ancient. You sip, and it feels like snowflakes whispering bedtime stories. You thank the builder. He shrugs. It's not magic, just listening to the land. And it's true. Every brick, every angle, every shadow here has been calibrated to respect heat without inviting it in. The Persian approach wasn't to fight the climate, it was to outwit it. Not with brute force, but with quiet patience. And the results, homes that don't need fans, don't need fridges, and yet somehow feel like a midday nap wrapped in clay and comfort. You stretch out in the shade, your back against a wall that's been sunbathing all morning, and yet it's cool. You close your eyes, lulled by the distant clink of dishes and the soft hush of breeze sliding through the badger above. And next you'll leave the comfort of the home and step into the heart of the market, where ice isn't just a luxury or a utility, but a selling point. You follow the sound of voices, of footsteps, of the unmistakable buzz of daily commerce carried on warm air. Just beyond the cool sanctuary of the Sardab, the city's pulse beats strongest at its center, the bazaar. The Persian marketplace is a maze, a serpentine warren of stalls, vaulted ceilings, archways heavy with shadows, and bursts of golden light from dome windows high above. The smell hits first cardamom-grilled lamb, rosewater dates, dried lemons, and weight-cold yogurt. You pause beside a stall where a vendor is scooping thick, chilled mastokiar, a yogurt and cucumber dip into a bowl, with a sliver of ice tucked beneath it like a treasure. He nods at you, eyebrows raised, clearly expecting an impressed reaction. You oblige because, honestly, this is impressive. It's the middle of the day, your sandals are beginning to squeak from heat, and this yogurt is shivering in its clay pot. Kanat water, he says proudly. Ran beneath our wall. Keeps the floor cold, see? And you do. The bricks beneath your feet are cool to the touch. A small trench of running water glides beside them, and above you, a modest wind catcher lets through the softest sigh of breeze. It's not a feast hall, not a palace, just a yogurt stand. But it's cooler than your childhood fridge. Mainstream fact. Persian markets were strategically designed with passive cooling vaulted ceilings, narrow alleys, shaded courtyards, and even underground channels for airflow and water circulation. Quirky tidbit. Some vendors chilled items by burying them in baskets beneath tiles or inside urns sunk directly into the bazaar floor. Open debate. Scholars still debate the precise layout of some ancient markets, whether their designs were coincidental or based on a formal understanding of thermodynamics. You continue down the bazaar, your senses flickering like candle flames. To your left, a man sells chilled rosewater syrup over crushed ice, the sort of snack that could only exist in a society where cold had been domesticated. His copper basin gleams and condensation drips off the ladle like silver raindrops. Next stall over preserved fish in brine sitting inside a shaded sunken box. It shouldn't work, but it does. Everything's cool enough to keep. The market breathes in sync with the land. You step into a spice stall, heat of a different kind here. The scent is electric. Saffron, cumin, turmeric, dried rose petals. But tucked in the corner, a jug of cool vinegar kept under a wet cloth that draws heat away as it evaporates. The seller explains that certain spices keep better if cooled ever so slightly. Otherwise, he adds with a wink, your stew tastes like regret. You duck into a quieter corridor. This part of the market is older stone floors, worn smooth ceiling arches close enough to touch. Here, a line of ice sellers displays their goods like royal jewels. The blocks are smaller now, many have melted during transit, but they're still valuable. A merchant kneels beside one carving slivers to wrap in palm leaves for quick sale. Children cluster nearby, begging for a flake to suck on. It hits you ice in the market isn't just a treat, it's status. Cool goods mean success, care, modernity, well, ancient modernity. You imagine two shoppers arguing, one boasting chilled melon slices, the other bragging about a block of mulberry sorbet melting just so. You find a seat in a shaded niche near a tea seller. He pours you a glass of heavily brewed black tea, then adds a single cube of ice to it. The tea hisses, changes color slightly, and suddenly you're sipping something new. Something strange. Something ancient and modern at once. You thank him. He shrugs. My grandfather used to freeze grapes too. Said they helped you think clearer in heat. Or lie better, depending on the grape. Around you, the market hums on. You notice now how every part of it seems designed for airflow. Vents above. Water channels below. Thick fabric shades overhead, rippling faintly in the wind. Even the sounds are designed for comfort, soft footfalls, rustling fabrics, the click of cups. There's no chaos here, no shouting. Just a kind of sleepy rhythm, like the market knows how hot it is, and doesn't want to move any faster than necessary. Eventually, you rise and make your way toward the exit, past a fruit stand where chilled apricots glisten beside fresh dates. The vendor smiles, hands you one for free. It's cold. Of course it is. You bite in. Sweet, floral, perfect. And next you'll follow a whisper. A rumor of romance tucked inside one of the oldest yakshals still standing, a tale, not of engineering or trade, but of love kept frozen in clay and time. You leave the market behind with your apricot pit still warm in your palm, and a strange feeling drifting through your chest. Part hunger, part nostalgia for something you haven't even seen yet. A local boy leads you through winding streets past half-collapsed walls and sun-cracked tiles, until finally he points. There, he says, the Yakchal of Whispers. The dome is older than the others. Squatter its curves, more slumped than arched. Moss creeps up one side like a quiet rumor, and vines cling to the mud brick, as if trying to hold the whole thing together. But it stands. You approach carefully. The entrance is half hidden beneath a fallen lintel. You duck inside. Cool air greets you again, your old friend. Inside light filters through a single vent high above, catching dust motes in its path like drifting ghosts. The floor spirals downward deeper than you expect. And carved, yes, carved into the inner wall, faint but unmistakable, are lines of poetry. Not technical notes, not inventory, poetry. You crouch, brushing your fingers across the script, the language old but still legible. It speaks of a man and a woman young from rival families, who met by chance during an ice delivery. He carried a block from the mountains. She worked in the palace kitchens. Their meetings were brief, their words few. But always at dawn, always beside the ice. Cool hands brushing. A smile here. A stolen fig there. Mainstream fact. Some surviving yakshals contain markings, inscriptions, or symbols carved into inner walls. Many believed to be names, dates, or prayers. Quirky tidbit. A Persian folktale speaks of a girl who wrote love poems on ice blocks, knowing they'd vanish before her father ever found them. Open debate. Historians disagree on whether such markings were casual graffiti or ceremonial messages left by workers, apprentices, or local lovers. You walk slowly around the chamber, the temperature steady and comforting. The walls tell more stories. In one corner, a pair of initials inside a heart. In another, what appears to be a camel drawn in hasty lines. And near the bottom, almost at the waterline, a single phrase deeply etched. What melts can still be remembered. The legend goes like this. The young man kept returning not for the job, but for the kitchen girl, and she waited. Every morning she would sneak an extra plum or rose petal from the palace pantry, and meet him at the Yakshal entrance. They never spoke much, but one morning the ice he brought had cracked. It was melting. He told her it will all vanish soon, and she said only if we forget it. She wrote that on the wall with a burnt stick. Later, someone carved it in. You sit against that wall now, your back resting against history and heartbreak. There's something intimate about this dome, not just its size, but its silence. It doesn't feel like a structure. It feels like a kept secret. The longer you stay, the more details you notice: the echo of your breath, the slight drip of condensation into a shallow basin, the breeze from the high vent just enough to carry dust and stories around the chamber like a whisper passed between friends. You think about how many lives passed through here, how many hands, how many early mornings, cracked fingers, short naps between deliveries, and maybe, just maybe, a few stolen kisses in the cold. You smile. Not everything about ancient Persia was politics and perfection. There were people, with dirty sandals, and frozen fingers, and soft spots for kitchen girls with too many apricots. You trace the wall once more and stand. Outside, the sun is higher, the shadows shorter, but the dome behind you keeps its hush, its gentle breath of ice, and the poems that never meant to survive. And next, you'll leave behind the lovers and their frostbitten memories, and enter sacred ground where chilled rosewater, not kisses, was poured to honor the flames of Zoroastrian fire temples. You follow a path cut into the rocky slope just beyond the city, narrow, dusty, lined with dry brush and thistles that crunch beneath your feet. It winds upward, curling like incense smoke around the shoulders of a hill. At the top, nestled between jagged stones and sunlight, waits something older than kings and colder than logic, a Zoroastrian fire temple where the flame never dies, and yet where ice plays a silent, sacred role. The entrance is simple, a rectangular arch, weather-worn, shaded by a low awning. But inside, stillness. A kind of hush that belongs to mountain peaks and quiet gods. You step inside. The floor is cool. Naturally. The walls are thick. The air doesn't move. It waits. The fire itself is tucked behind a curtain, tended by priests in white robes, who walk barefoot and speak only in whispers. It burns steadily, soft, yellow-orange. Somehow it doesn't feel hot, just alive. A novice priest leads you to a side chamber. There in the corner is a basin of water, cool, shallow, gently rippling. A jar of rosewater rests beside it, and in it a chunk of ice floats like a forgotten moon. You kneel beside it. The air smells of earth and faint spice. The ice clicks softly as it shifts in the liquid. This, you're told, is not for refreshment. It's for ritual. In Zoroastrianism, fire and water are the sacred elements, eternal cleansing, never to be polluted. And when heat threatened to overwhelm the fire halls, especially during high summer, priests cooled the surrounding space using simple techniques. Water basins, buried jars, wet cloth, and in rare cases, blocks of ice brought from the Yakshal below. Mainstream fact. In some documented ceremonies, rosewater cooled with ice was poured in ritual cleansing near Zoroastrian fires, an act meant to honor the dual purity of fire and water. Quirky tidbit. There's a 9th century account of a temple that used sheep's wool-lined crates to hide ice inside the prayer chamber so it wouldn't melt before the evening ritual. Open debate. Some historians argue over whether ice in temples had purely practical cooling purposes, or if it carried deeper symbolic meaning tied to seasonal balance and divine equilibrium. You reach out and dip your fingers into the basin. It's chilly. Not shivering cold, but enough to raise goosebumps. A priest approaches with a copper bowl, fills it, and walks it gently into the fire chamber. There, before the eternal flame, he tips it slowly, letting the chilled rosewater hit hot stones with a soft hiss and puff of steam. It smells divine. It smells ancient. The symbolism isn't lost on you. Fire and ice, heat and cold, life and restraint. Even in devotion, the Persians understood balance. You wonder if the priests ever smiled as the steam rose and said to one another, "Even the gods need a breeze. You're invited to stay longer." You do. The stone benches around the temple wall are cool, wrapped in woven mats. You sit. A woman brings you a small cup of barley drink, lightly chilled, scented with basil. You sip, watching the light play on the dome above. There's no gold, no stained glass. But the quiet here sparkles more than any jewel. A whisper nearby catches your attention, two young novices arguing softly about the delivery schedule. Apparently, the last ice block arrived half-melted. One blames the camel. The other says the Yakshal vent was left uncovered. You don't intrude. Religious logistics, it turns out, are still logistics. As the day slips forward, the chamber stays steady. The rosewater basin is refilled. The flame remains untouched. The priests move like shadows. And every now and then, a drop of ice clicks softly in its bowl, offering a rhythm as ancient as prayer. You bow politely and step outside. The sun is sharp again, but the heat doesn't hit quite so hard now, not after that. And as you descend the trail, you realize the ancient Persians didn't just fight the heat. They honored it, controlled it, balanced it, even brought it into their sacred places and placed a gentle hand of ice upon its forehead. And next you'll return to the city's modern ones now, where echoes of this sacred geometry still linger in rooftops and skylines. Because old tricks never truly disappear. The path winds downward again, this time not to the past, but toward the present. You find yourself in Yazd, a city caught halfway between history and heatstroke. It rises from the desert like a half-buried memory ochre buildings, stacked like forgotten chess pieces alleys that zigzag like whispered secrets. And above it all, those same familiar shapes you've come to recognize like old friends. Domes, wind catchers. The faded bones of ancient yakshals standing in quiet corners between apartment blocks and satellite dishes. You wander slowly through the city's old quarter. The streets are narrow and shaded. The walls, thick and earthen, still carry the logic of centuries past. And as you turn a corner, you see it, a restored yakshal tucked behind a small school. A sign reads, "Used until the 1950s, reopened as a learning site." The dome is shorter than you remember, the bricks newer, but the shape is the same, like the desert itself sat down and folded its hands. A group of students is touring with a local guide. You follow from a respectful distance, listening. The guide points out the vents, the Qanat remains, even a partial badgir above the courtyard. You smile. You've seen all this before. Underground, on rooftops, in temples and homes. But now it's all in one place, tucked into the middle of a modern city, like a memory that refused to leave. Mainstream fact. Yazd. One of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth still contains functioning wind catchers and remnants of yakshals integrated into urban architecture. Quirky tidbit. Some boutique hotels in Yazd use restored sardabs and Qanat-fed fountains as natural air conditioning, offering guests chilled apricot juice upon arrival. Open debate, urban planners argue whether restoring ancient cooling systems is sustainable at scale, or simply a nostalgic nod to pre-electric elegance. You keep walking, past a public bathhouse that now operates as a museum. Its reception chamber still faintly cool. A school courtyard where children chase a ball across the smooth, shaded stone. One side of the yard is bordered by a Qanat-fed channel. You glance down. The water flows gently, not much, but enough to ripple. And in the newer parts of the city, the echoes continue. Modern homes here have AC units humming, sure, but some still include wind catchers not as decoration but as function. Builders layer in insulation the way their grandfathers layered straw and mud. You even pass a cafe, its name cheekily referencing a yakshal, where the tables are set beside a small underground ice room open for guests to explore. You descend into the cafe's cellar. It's a reconstruction, sure, but it's faithful. The walls curve, the floor dips. The air hushes as you step into it. They've tucked bookshelves into the brick. Lit candles float in niches. It's less about storage now and more about stillness. A server offers you a cold drink in a ceramic cup, cucumber water with mint. No plastic. No refrigeration unit humming behind the wall. Just centuries of wisdom trapped in clay and gravity. You sip, it's perfect. Back on the streets, you look up at the skyline. Wind catchers rise like exclamation points against the blue. You count at least 20 from where you stand. Some are abandoned, others refurbished. A few stand proudly above new structures, defying the boxy angles of concrete apartments with their stubborn elegance. And it's not just Yazd. You pull out a map and notice notations Kerman Kashan, even Tehran in places. Architects experimenting again. Schools teaching the principles. Engineers calculating airflow based on ancient blueprints. Even eco-designers borrowing ideas from Persia's past for cooling systems in hot zones worldwide. It's not about going backward. It's about listening to what worked. What worked without fuel, without fans, without a footprint. A breeze kicks up. It slips down an alley and dances across your collar. You smile. Somewhere, a badger is doing its job. And as you wander past the quiet yakshal behind the school, you overhear a child asking, "Why did they keep ice under dirt?" The teacher answers without skipping a beat, because they were smarter than they looked. You laugh softly. That about sums it up. And next you'll return to the stories, the myths, because not all yakshals fell to time. Some melted for stranger reasons, demons, curses, or tax collectors with no chill at all. You wander out of Yazd's orderly lanes and into the scrublands, beyond where the wind whistles differently, like it has secrets to tell. Here, the ruins of old ice domes dot the earth like molars in the jawbone of a giant. Some are crumbled, others tilted. A few half sunk into sand. But each one has a story. You sit on a flat rock beneath the sun and listen as an old man nearby sets down a sack of herbs and clears his throat. His name is Davood. He's a shepherd, or maybe a storyteller, or maybe both. And he's been waiting years, perhaps, for someone to ask him about the cursed yakshal. There was one, he says, north of the Salt Hills. Big as a whale. Cold as a jealous wife. Worked better than any in the province ice all year round milk that stayed sweet for weeks, even in Tyr. He pauses, until it melted overnight. You blink. Overnight. Overnight, he nods gravely. One morning, ice chest full. Next morning, gone. Not a drop left. Only steam rising like smoke from the floor. Mainstream fact. Many ancient yakshals fell into disuse due to structural collapse, war, or changes in trade routes. Quirky tidbit folklore across Iran often attributes these collapses to supernatural mischief, jinn angry spirits, or the eye of a jealous neighbor. Open debate. Some researchers suggest tax levies during imperial rule hastened the abandonment of ice houses, though evidence remains scattered. Davood leans in. They say a jinn cursed it. Or maybe the boy who dropped a peach pit in the ice pit did something worse than we knew. Some say it was just taxes. The king's men came counted the ice and decided it was too much for one village. Ordered it redistributed. The owner wept so loud the dome cracked. You're not sure if any of this is true, but in the Persian desert where temperatures reach 40 degrees and everything melts, eventually, even stories, truth, is a flexible thing. He offers another tale. A man built a private yakshal just for his wedding, hired 3 camel teams, kept a music troupe in the shade for a week. Ice for every guest. They say it was the finest party ever thrown in that district. But Davood adds, raising a bushy brow, his wife ran off with the spice merchant after the second sorbet. You laugh. He doesn't. That yakshal never worked again. You move on deeper into the broken land of half-forgotten ice domes. Each ruin has a unique scar. One collapsed inward roof shattered like an eggshell. One was split cleanly in two as if Zeus himself had struck it. Another has what looks like claw marks near the base, though it's probably just erosion. Probably. You step into a particularly well-preserved ruin. The dome above is cracked, but the interior is still shaded. You sit. It's cooler here, oddly so. A few birds flutter overhead. Something about the stillness makes your skin tingle. Scratched into the wall, nearly invisible, a single word. Honk, hunak, cool. You run your hand across it. Someone long ago sat in this same spot. Touched this same wall. Thought this same thought. And maybe that's why the myths flourish, because people couldn't believe something this clever, this precious, could fall apart for mundane reasons. No one wants to say, the vent cracked, the shade shifted, the bricks gave way. It's more satisfying to blame a djinn, a jealous suitor, or divine boredom. You climb the ridge above the ruins and look out. Once this valley held a network of yakshals, storage pits, badgers, qanats threading underfoot like a circulatory system. Now, just sand. But beneath that sand, maybe still cold clay whispers to itself, waiting, remembering. And next, you'll sip tea with scholars arguing under a mulberry tree, wrestling with what it all meant: utility or symbolism, science or poetry. Because history is never just bricks and dust. Sometimes it's two academics shouting about ice over a bowl of warm grapes. The ridge path winds back toward civilization, not the bustling chaos of a market, nor the royal hush of a temple, but a quieter kind of bustle, the academic kind. You find yourself in a sun-dappled courtyard, shaded by a heavy-limbed mulberry tree, its leaves fluttering like lazy applause. Beneath it, 3 scholars sit around a low table cluttered with scrolls, notebooks, ceramic mugs, and what appears to be a nearly finished plate of melon slices. A samovar hums gently nearby. You've stumbled upon what can only be described as a very polite argument, the kind that's been going on for decades. Symbolism, one man insists, jabbing a pen in the air. You think peasants cared about optimal airflow? They were participating in ritual. The cold was spiritual. Please, scoffs another, sipping his tea with theatrical calm. You sound like a poet. This was practical architecture, clever, yes, but not metaphysical. The third scholar, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, chimes in without looking up from her notes. You're both wrong. It's both. Practical form elevated by cultural meaning. The Persians were smart enough not to separate the two. You pull up a stool. No one minds. They've been arguing for hours, days, maybe centuries. You suspect they were born here under this tree mid-debate. Mainstream fact, academic discourse surrounding Persian cooling systems spans both engineering and cultural theory. Quirky tidbit. In 1984, a heated yet entirely cordial conference in Esfahan ended with a chalkboard drawing of a yakshal labeled science on the bottom, poetry on the top. Open debate. Scholars remain divided on whether the placement of yakshals and qanats in certain urban layouts had astrological or symbolic significance, or were just practical positioning based on topography. One scholar brings out an old city map. He traces the location of a series of yakshals and mutters, "Notice how many align with older religious sites." The poet scholar leans in triumphant. Exactly cold as cleansing, not just cooling. The engineer types grumpily on his tablet. Or because that was the only available north-facing slope in the valley. You're offered tea served from a clay jug cooled by evaporation. It tastes like calm. You sip and listen. The woman flips through a crumbling manuscript. There's a line here: "The ice of the righteous does not melt in summer." She looks up. Is it metaphor? Is it literal? The fact that we have to ask is the answer. You feel like you've wandered into a living footnote, a digression from a textbook that sprouted legs and opened a tea shop. They argue about labor next were yakshals maintained by communal effort or controlled by elites. One says village records suggest shared ownership. Another says royal seals were found near some ice pits. The third shrugs and says both can be true. Welcome to Persian history, where contradictions coexist like mint and yogurt. A breeze rustles the leaves above. The sunlight shifts. A student arrives with more notes and a handful of grapes, warm, slightly wrinkled, but still sweet. You learn he's cataloging carvings found inside collapsed yakshals. Mostly dates and names, he says. But once we found a sketch of a lion eating a melon. No context, no explanation. Just there. You laugh, but the scholars nod solemnly. That tracks. The debate circles back to symbolism. One scholar brings up burial rites. Another mentions Zoroastrian dualism, how cold and heat reflected moral balance. Someone says the placement of ice blocks in ceremonial processions may have mimicked lunar phases. You ask the obvious question. But weren't they just trying to survive the heat? Silence. A beat. Then all 3 answer at once. Yes. No. Maybe. You smile. The woman pats your arm and says, "The truth is, when a civilization builds something so beautiful, so functional, and so enduring, it stops being just a tool. It becomes a mirror of who they were, what they needed, what they feared." You lean back, the mulberry branches swaying gently overhead, your cup empty, but your head full. And next you'll leave the debate behind and follow whispers of conflict, how rival villages once turned cooling power into political power, and the unexpected role that ice played in ancient rivalries. You leave the scholarly circle behind, tea-warmed and brain-buzzed, and wander out toward the desert again this time, following a different kind of story. Not poems carved in clay, not whispered metaphors or arguments under trees. This time it's about power. Because while ice may seem like the gentlest of luxuries, something soft, soothing, maybe even romantic in ancient Persia, cold could mean control. You're headed toward a place locals call Gavbend, once the center of a centuries-old dispute between neighboring villages, and at the heart of it, a yakshal. You arrive at the crumbled remains by midday. It's nothing but a broken dome now half buried in silt and wild grasses. But the bones are still there. The layout, the trench, the shadows. And just nearby, across a dry canal, you see another one. Slightly taller, slightly less broken, slightly smug-looking, if buildings could smirk. The story, as told by an old woman selling pomegranate syrup by the road, goes like this. 2 villages, she says, 2 yakshals. One built first, one bigger, one colder. They used to share, then they didn't. Then people stopped sharing bread. Then someone salted the other's ice. You blink. Salted it. She nods grimly. A week's delivery ruined. They say the goats wouldn't even drink from it. Mainstream fact. In arid regions, control of cold storage meant control of perishable goods, medicines, and prestige, especially during drought or heat waves. Quirky tidbit. Some Persian villages held annual cold festivals, where the first successful ice harvest from a yakshal was paraded through town like a prize. Open debate. There's ongoing discussion about how much political clout ice owners held, whether they were community-appointed caretakers or self-declared lords of the cold. You walk the short path between the 2 villages. It's dry now, but you can imagine it 2 communities, tethered by a kanat that split like a wishbone. One side getting a little more shade, a little more water flow, a little more ice. It was enough. Eventually, one village started charging for ice access. Not much, just a few coins or some bread or a service owed. Then came regulations who could draw how much on which days. Then guards. It got worse. You pass a crumbled wall marked with charcoal lines, tally marks. Maybe measurements. Maybe ration records. Maybe warnings. The feud peaked one summer when the western village blocked their half of the kanat for cleaning. The eastern village's yakshal, deprived of water, ran dry. Tempers boiled. The local priest tried to mediate. No one listened. By harvest season, the 2 sides were refusing to trade. One account says the feud ended when both yakshals cracked from neglect. Another says someone, no one ever confirmed, who dug a secret channel under the boundary and siphoned enough water to keep their dome alive, while the other melted. You stare at the domes now. Ruins. Twins turned rivals. No signage. No tourist plaques. Just 2 lumps in the earth with a long memory. Back in the first village, the old woman pours you a glass of chilled mulberry syrup. We all use electric coolers now, she says, but people still remember who used to have the coldest yakshal. It's like family blood. You don't forget. You sip. It's excellent. The point isn't that ice made people fight. The point is, anything scarce, sacred, and brilliant can become a weapon if you let it. Even silence. Even breeze. Even the quiet pride of a shadow that falls just a little longer on one side of a dome. And next you'll zoom out. Way out. Because Persia's ice wasn't confined to one kingdom. It migrated by road, by empire, by rumor, all the way to India, Egypt, and Rome. And with it, the dream of capturing cold under the cruelest sun. The road stretches out behind you, domes in ruins, poetry, in walls, debates beneath trees. Now it's time to go farther. Much farther. Because the knowledge of cold didn't just stay bottled up in Persia. It traveled. Across deserts and mountain passes, along silk routes and salt roads, in the minds of builders and the stories of traders. Ice, as it turns out, was contagious. You climb into a slow-moving caravan bound eastward, camels again, of course, and you begin tracing the arc of ancient Persian influence across the known world. Your first stop, the Indus Valley. Historians believe Persian cooling technology likely traveled into what's now Pakistan and northwest India via the Achaemenid Empire's eastern expansion. There it mingled with local water traditions, stepwells, shaded courtyards, and massive stone cisterns. In cities like Taxila, early architectural blueprints reveal underground storage chambers shaped suspiciously like squat yakshals. Mainstream fact: Persian influence over parts of the Indian subcontinent included not just governance and language, but hydraulic infrastructure and passive cooling design. Quirky tidbit: some Indian palace kitchens used hybrid yakshal-style pits to store frozen desserts, made from snow collected during Himalayan expeditions. Open debate. Scholars argue whether these innovations were imported co-developed or inspired by even older South Asian water management systems. You rest in a Mughal-era fort where, curiously, the servants still call their ice chamber yakshal, no one remembers why. You stand inside it. Same thick walls. Same domed chill. But this one smells faintly of cardamom and mango pulp. Next westward. You cross Egypt following the ghost of Cambyses II, the Persian king who tried to conquer it. In ancient Memphis, you speak with an archivist who shows you an incomplete schematic, a trapezoidal building designed for ice or spirits. She doesn't know which. You both suspect it's the same thing. Egypt, with its own desert mastery, didn't take long to adopt and modify. Instead of domes, they favored sunken granaries and mud brick silos, but the idea was the same: cold equals life. And always the river. The Nile, like the Connaught, carried not just water, but ideas. You hear rumors of aristocratic households lining cellars with clay tiles to keep date wine crisp. One man claims his grandfather buried snow in goat skins, soaked with vinegar to chill melon cubes for a vizier. You don't question it. You just want to try that melon. Then further still across the Mediterranean, you arrive in Rome, land of aqueducts and architectural ego. Surely if anyone would claim to invent the yakshal retroactively, it would be a Roman. And in a way, they did. Roman patricians imported snow from the Apennines, packed it in straw, hauled it into underground cisterns. Sound familiar? They used it to cool amphorae of wine and to serve chilled sorbetto at feasts. Of course, they had to name it after themselves Navarium, but the soul of it's still Persian. Mainstream fact: Romans used snow pits Navaria for food preservation and luxury cooling, often building them in shaded villas or beside aqueduct-fed cellars. Quirky tidbit: Nero reportedly sent runners daily to fetch snow for his flavored ice drinks, his favorite honey lemon. Open debate. Some claim Rome developed these independently. Others suggest Eastern influence via trade with Persia or knowledge passed through conquest. As you walk through a reconstructed Roman villa's ice chamber, a local historian mutters, "We always say we taught the world roads, but the Persians, they taught us to be comfortable." You sit on a marble bench. A servant brings you something cold plum juice with a few snowflakes melting on top. You taste it and close your eyes. Across thousands of miles, hundreds of years, and a dozen empires, the idea of capturing cold had caught fire. You begin to see the pattern wherever humans settled beneath a brutal sun. The dream of soft coldness appeared. Not just a need, but a longing. Not just technology, but poetry, status, survival, and something sacred. Even today, in the cool halls of museums, or the humming silence of refrigeration units, you'll find echoes of those first yakshals. They stand in our fridges, our ice trays, our popsicles, our late-night freezer raids. Cold, once a miracle, is now mundane, but only because someone long ago refused to let it melt. And next, you'll slow things down again back to the last remaining yakshal, in a remote village where memory and dust keep vigil, and the stars rise above a dome that still breathes. You've come full circle now. No more cities. No more caravans or scholars or fruit sellers with questionable melon stories. Just one road, barely a road at all, snaking through hills browned by years and silence. And at the end of it, tucked into a bend between two weather-smoothed ridges, sits a dome. You know the shape by now. You could sketch it in your sleep. But this one feels different. It's not surrounded by ruins or tourists or half-remembered tales. It just sits like a stone heart waiting between beats. The villagers call it Kola Ikak, the dust hat. You approach slowly. There's no ceremony. No gate. Just a shallow trench and a narrow entrance partly buried in silt. You duck inside, and it's like stepping into a breath held for 1,000 years. The air wraps around you, cool, still, intimate. Inside the pit is dry now. No ice, no stored grain. But the silence is so perfect, so heavy, that your own heartbeat sounds like a misplaced drum. You sit, not out of reverence, but because your legs ask you to. The dome above curves like the inside of a shell. A single shaft of light filters down from the top vent, cutting through dust like a sword made of dawn. Mainstream fact. A handful of functional yakchals still exist today in remote Iranian villages, often repurposed for storage shelter or even quiet prayer. Quirky tidbit locals. In some areas say sleeping inside a yakchal during summer cures headaches and heartbreaks, though scientific evidence remains inconclusive. Open debate, some heritage groups argue for full restoration and tourist access. Others say they should remain untouched as they are sleeping monuments to human patience. A child enters behind you, no older than 7, barefoot, carrying nothing but a piece of string. He doesn't notice you at first, just walks the perimeter, trailing the string in a lazy spiral along the floor. At the center, he squats and begins to hum. The tune is simple. Ancient, maybe, or just made up. You don't ask. Outside, the village hums faintly. Not much. A few roosters, the creak of a wheel, a distant laugh. But here in the dome, time has its feet up. You think of all the places this journey took you, qanats, caravans, royal banquets, ruined domes, romantic scribbles in mud. All the ways cold was not just weather, not just temperature, but meaning. And now here in the last yakchal, still standing tall and quiet, you realize it still works. Not to chill yogurt, not to store mountain ice, but to hold stillness, to remind, to teach. A low breeze slips in through the door, curls upward, spins gently inside the dome, like a cat before sleep. The dust dances. The child stops humming. You whisper without meaning to, still cold. He looks at you and nods, then runs out barefoot again, string in hand. You stay behind. A long while later, you step back into the light. And next, you'll trace the timeline of this marvel, not through places, but through time itself. See how ice and empire move together across the centuries, each cooling the other, each melting in turn. Because history, like a good ice dome, works best when it's layered. The dust settles behind you as you walk, but this time you're not heading toward a place, you're heading along a timeline. Not the dry, year-stamped kind with generals and treaties. This one runs cold. It winds like a qanat beneath the skin of history, touching empires, rituals, markets, and whispers. And today you'll follow it not through maps, but through moments. 500 BCE. You begin in the Achaemenid Empire, standing among builders outside Persepolis, watching the first experimental mud dome rise from the earth. They mix ash clay and goat hair in silence. One of them mutters that he once saw a mountain glacier and never forgot it. Now he's trying to build one underground. No one knows if it'll work, but the sun is merciless, so they try. 300 BCE. In a village near Susa, a woman pours cool water for her son from a ceramic jug buried in straw set next to a small prototype of a yakchal. She doesn't call it that. She just says the pit with shade. But the water makes her boy laugh. Tastes like the river in winter. That's good enough. 100 CE. You stand in silence inside a Zoroastrian fire temple as a basin of ice-chilled rosewater hisses on hot stone. Outside, Roman traders argue about cinnamon prices. Inside, a priest chants in a low voice, eyes flicking briefly toward the melting cube like it's a prophecy. 750 CE. Arab mathematicians study Persian engineering in books translated line by line. One of them sketches a dome next to an equation. He wonders if airflow has geometry. He's not wrong. 1100 CE. A caravan master builds a backup ice pit halfway between Yazd and Kerman after losing too much cargo the summer before. He names it after his daughter. It's still there, buried, but occasionally used by goats. 1300 CE. A wedding takes place during drought. The father of the groom offers chilled honey water. No one says anything aloud, but every guest silently calculates how much he must have paid. That's influence you can drink. 1500 CE. An Ottoman spy records strange Persian cooling structures in his journal, wondering whether they store scrolls, bodies, or wine. He draws one badly. Later, historians find the sketch and laugh, but also realize it's the earliest known Western drawing of a yakchal. 1600 CE. You sit with a Persian poet in Isfahan. He writes a verse about love so sharp it cracked the dome. He's not a builder, but he's seen a heart melt faster than ice, and that's enough. 1800 CE. A British traveler visiting Qazvin buys a block of miracle for 3 silver coins. It melts before he gets back to his tent. He writes home the Persians trap winter beneath their feet. His brother thinks it's a metaphor. 1905. The first refrigeration machine arrives in Tehran. It breaks within the week. Meanwhile, the yakchal down the road cools cucumbers and lemon syrup without complaint. 1957. A young girl sits inside her family's sardab with her grandmother. They say the dome used to hum, the grandmother says. Not a sound you heard, but one you felt in your chest. The girl listens. She believes it. 1980s urban planners rediscover qanats and passive cooling systems during a particularly brutal summer. Someone calls them eco-architecture. An old mason just chuckles and says, "We called it common sense." 2001. A local NGO funds the partial restoration of a ruined yakshal. A plaque is installed. It reads, "Here cold lived." Tourists pose for photos beside it, unaware of the 100 weddings, a dozen funerals, and countless whispered poems. It once cooled. 2023. An architecture student in Toronto reads about wind catchers. She designs a rooftop cooling system for her dorm using the same principles. Her professor says elegant, if outdated. She wins the competition anyway. And now, you, sitting in your room, maybe on a couch or curled in bed. Fan humming. Screen glowing. Eyes soft, blinking slower now. And in your ears. The story of cold that moved not by storm, but by stubbornness, kindness, and design. From snow-lugging villagers to ice-scribbling lovers. From chill temples to cracked domes. A whole civilization that said, yes, the sun is powerful, but not unbeatable. And next you'll descend into one final night, the very last dome, the last sigh, the moment cold, and time and breath finally come to rest beneath stars. It's night now, not dusk, not the golden yawn of evening, but true night where everything softens, and the desert sky opens wide like a velvet bowl scattered with salt. You stand at the edge of a small village. No sign, no road. Just silence and stars. And one last dome. This one isn't on any tourist map. It's barely even marked on the ground. Half swallowed by sand, chipped by wind, and propped up by time alone, it squats like a sleeping animal still unimpressed and waiting. You hesitate before going in. Not because of fear, but because this one feels final. Inside, it's darker than the others. Your eyes need a moment to adjust. No torches, no lanterns, no guided tours or schoolchildren with notebooks. Just stone silence and the faintest echo of cool. And when you do adjust, you see it. A thin layer of frost hugging the back wall. Barely there. A suggestion of cold. Like the ghost of snow. You sit down on the curved ledge, and the wall behind you is neither cold nor warm. It just is. Grounded. Quiet. You run your fingers over the texture. Rough here. Smooth there. Every inch shaped by someone who expected it to hold something precious. This was once a place of purpose, a community lifeline, a domestic miracle. Now it's a kind of desert cathedral. No sermons, just soft breath. You close your eyes. The silence is thick. The air doesn't move. And yet you feel something shift, a tiny pressure in your chest. A kind of ancient exhale. Because this dome, this very space was built by hands that refused to surrender to the sun. That said, no, we will have winter even here, even if we must build it ourselves. One mud brick at a time. Mainstream fact. This region once had over 100 working yakshals. Only a dozen remain in any recognizable form. Quirky tidbit. Locals in some villages believe if you whisper a secret inside a yakshal at night, it will stay cold forever. Open debate. Whether preserving these structures serves education heritage or simply comforts a part of us that still dreams of cold in the impossible. You lie down. The stone is hard, yes, but the shape, the echo, the dimness somehow makes it the most restful place you've found. Through the hole in the top, you see the stars. They don't flicker, they rest. Like they've been watching all along. The thought comes uninvited. You're inside a wish, not a building. A wish. A dome-shaped prayer whispered by people who couldn't bear the heat anymore, and decided that even in the fiercest desert relief was possible. Even if it had to be shaped from dust and goat hair and stubbornness. You breathe in, slow. The air is dry but cool, and you know it's time to sleep. But first, just once you whisper something into the dome. Something quiet. Maybe your name. Maybe a memory. Maybe nothing at all. The dome takes it, holds it. Like it held the ice. Like it always will. And next, you'll return to the city one last time, not for facts or fables, but to walk the final echoes, to gather all the pieces of this story, and let them settle like snow at the bottom of your mind. You wake slowly. Not to an alarm, not to a rooster, or a call to prayer. Just the gradual lightening of the dome above you. The pale blush of morning seeping through the circular vent like someone softly drawing open the curtains of the world. You rise, your back stiff, your breath still slow. You're not cold, but you're not warm either. Just balanced. You step outside. The air is different now, morning air. It hasn't yet remembered how hot it's supposed to be. It still believes in mercy, and the dome behind you, it doesn't say goodbye. It just remains. As it always has. As it always will. You walk back toward the city, or what remains of it. Not the noisy heart of bazaars and banquet halls, just the echoes. Here's an alley where a boy once carried a jug of ice to his grandmother. Here's a small courtyard where a goat slept against the outer wall of a sardab. Here's a cracked fountain whose water once ran chill with Connaught-fed currents now dry and still whispering. The ruins aren't spectacular. There's no fanfare, but they're enough. Enough to make you feel like you're walking through memory. At one turn, you find the remains of a badger, its top half gone, but the shaft still rising. You stand beneath it and feel nothing. No breeze today, but you know it could catch wind. If the wind showed up, if the dome still dreamed. Further down, you find a mosaic in the rubble, a single blue tile with a pomegranate motif. Cracked, faded, still beautiful. You sit on a low wall and watch the light creep across the street. You imagine the past laid over the present like transparent silk carts, rolling sandals, slapping voices arguing over the price of apricots, and always in the background a hum of cooling systems. Invisible, constant, sacred. Mainstream fact. Modern Persian cities still borrow design elements from ancient climate-adaptive architecture. Quirky tidbit. Some homeowners today install fake badgers just to honor their grandparents' homes, even if the units no longer function. Open debate. Conservationists continue to argue over preserving ruins exactly as they are versus reactivating them for modern use. Some say memory must breathe. Others say it must rest. You hear the call of a tea vendor in the distance, not shouting, just announcing, like he's offering tea to ghosts. You smile and follow the sound. He serves you a glass. It's not iced, just cool. Clay cup cool. Evaporation cool. The kind of cool that isn't showy but earned. You sip and say nothing. He nods. You don't need to say you've spent the last few days crawling through the architectural bloodstream of Persia's coldest dreams. You don't need to say you lay down inside a dome built to defeat the sun. You don't need to say anything. Because here in the final morning of your journey, the story has already settled. Into your spine, into your memory, into the clay cup cooling your hands. And next you'll close your eyes one final time, not to sleep, but to listen. To the soft last breath of this story. To the wind down, to the whisper of frost. You've returned. Not to a place, but to a feeling. The kind that lingers after a long journey. After the camels have gone, after the scholars have fallen silent, after the last block of ice has melted in someone's palm, you're no longer walking, you're remembering. This final dome isn't one you enter with your feet, it's one you build in your mind. A quiet place, a chilled chamber, round and low and lit from above by a gentle shaft of dusk. The walls here are smooth not from time, but from thought. From having been visited again and again each time, a little more worn, a little more sacred, you sit, and the story of Persian ice flows around you not as facts, but as fragments. The crunch of straw beneath a melting block, a jug of yogurt nestled in a shaded trench, a priest tipping chilled rosewater onto a sacred flame, a wedding kiss cooled by frozen honey, a child humming to herself beneath a dome where nothing stirs but memory. You smile. Because none of this was about ice, really. It was about resistance. About people who looked at their brutal climate, their impossible geography, their infinite summer and said, "We can still carve a pocket of comfort here." And they did. With mud. With airflow. With silence. The Yakchal is gone now, maybe. Or maybe it's still standing somewhere watching stars, listening for footsteps, remembering the sound of water sliding across stone. And you now carry it. The cold. The cleverness, the deep, slow rhythm of human refusal to surrender to heat. You lay back. The dome above you curves gently. The story doesn't end, it settles. And in that stillness, in that cooling quiet, we enter the wind down. So now just breathe. Let the air around you soften. Let your muscles loosen, not all at once, but in layers. Like the walls of a dome, cooling from the outside in. Let your eyelids rest. Let your thoughts pool gently at the base of your mind. You are lying beneath 1,000-year-old Yakshal. The earth around you holds the chill. The wind above is soft and slow. You are safe. You are cool. You are where empires once stored the heart of winter, where lovers scribbled names in ice, where engineers bent airflow to their will, and where someone like you, thousands of years ago, may have sat in the exact same silence and simply exhaled. Let your breath grow longer. Let it drift like sand sifting down the spiral floor. The dome above you is strong. The bricks are patient. The shadows are kind. And if you listen closely, you might still hear it, the soft drip, drip, drip of a melting past still trying to cool the world. You don't need to move. You don't need to think. Just stay here for a while, in this dome of thought, in this breath of ice, in this hush of story. You've earned the cold. You've earned the stillness. And now, you can finally rest.